I've got both running at the same time, so I have an audio backup running if detail craps out again.
Okay.
I mean, hey, like you said, we're learning with every single one how to do this. So our cigars are already burned down. You want to explain why?
We had some technical difficulties.
We might have lost 30 minutes worth of content.
I do think we need to. This is a great time to explain this, by the way. We are two people. Okay? One of us, being me, is not as technically sound as the other. I consider myself to be the social media guy, which I'm still figuring out, which is a whole nother animal in itself. Clint's the technical guy. He's also the accountant.
And not very good at it.
What'd you say?
And said and not very good at it.
Oh, I disagree. But we are also learning several different ways to run this sucker. We lost about 36 minutes worth of audio and video, which is fine.
So now we are, for the first time ever, on. This is technically episode 11 because we did a bonus episode, but we are now technically on episode 11 running a backup for the first time.
So 10, episode 10. By the way, we didn't congratulate each other on that, by the way.
Double digits.
Double digits. We made it.
So we are now running a backup audio. So if the primary software craps out again, we'll have a backup.
So our cigars are about halfway burnt.
They are. I'm glad I have another one over here. Do you have
I have two more.
Oh,
I always carry a backup.
We are set. And we don't have to go to work tomorrow. So
this is true. So, by the way, I'm smoking. I think I figured out what it is. A Harem and Solomon, Connecticut, as always.
Connecticut. So we're going to talk about some things we've already talked about that y'all didn't get the privilege of getting to hear the first time through. Our ideas might be better refined, or maybe we won't. So
more to think about. But I do want to, I don't want it to feel like we're kind of jumping right in, but we are, because we're not going to talk about sports again.
Yeah.
Cowboys suck.
Cowboys suck.
We've established that.
We think Mike McCarthy's going to stay.
We both think Mike McCarthy's going to stay.
Rangers are looking good and make some moves.
Mavs looking good, even
Luke
though
is
Luke is
hurt.
hurt.
Yep.
There you go. That's the first.
That's
the first 12 minutes.
That's the first 12 minutes right there. Just right in there.
So, but we are just two guys. Literally, what our Facebook profile says: two guys doing life and a podcast and talking politics occasionally. And there's a learning curve to it all. Now, if we're getting to number 100,
we got to get it figured out by then.
Hopefully, that's 2 years.
Train one of our kids to be a producer. But I will say, because this content was missed, I'm very pleased with this cigar that I'm smoking. It is a Carrillo Allegiance. There's the label on my camera. It's the first time I've smoked this one, but if you are a cigar smoker, I do highly recommend it. That's it. I like it a lot.
Also, the first time I've smoked this one, it's almost just like every other Connecticut. It's a Robusto in size, so it's a little bit bigger in diameter. I don't mind that. Doesn't bother me one way or the other. If we get to a second one, I'm going to go to my Rojas Street Taco Carnitas. That'll be my second one. Those are my favorite. Just kind of the daily, what would be considered a daily smoke.
It's your everyday smoke. Like you got an everyday carry for your handgun, you got an everyday smoke.
I got an everyday smoke. So, even though we did talk about this, I want to discuss the cigar etiquette when you're walking outside of a cigar lounge. Please don't make faces at the people smoking a cigar in front of the cigar lounge.
Yeah, if you're going to walk outside of a cigar shop, you're going to smell some cigars being smoked, and you need to be okay with that. Don't clutch your pearls too tightly. It's okay. Just walk. Especially the particular cigar shop you're talking about has a giant fountain in front of it. You know, it's a big horseshoe shaped area. Like you can walk around. You could really so easily walk around it. It's almost like you have to be walking towards it on purpose to walk next to it. But I digress.
And the lady was definitely a Karen.
Definitely a Karen.
With her.
She was actually going home to complain about some kid's lemonade stand right then. Don't do that. Don't do that. To each their own. If you don't like cigars, don't like cigars, but don't complain walking outside a cigar shop. Come on now.
Yeah, it is frustrating as a cigar smoker. So we made a great point about Trump. Let's talk about it just a little bit and we'll move on.
Yeah, I was just saying that I really am starting to notice, and I think this is something that we will continue to work out as the Trump presidency continues. But in my opinion, the Trump supporter, the Trump voter, and the Trump movement is based on more of Trump than it is party. And we've said this before, that I don't think Trump is a Republican in the most traditional sense of that word. I think he's an independent that ran as a Republican because independents don't get elected. And so he ran against the party that most closely aligned with him. But if you think about the Republican candidates we've had with Romney, McCain, and Bush, Trump doesn't fit into that mold. I believe he is an independent that ran as a Republican. And that
shows by the people that he brought on too.
Yeah.
We didn't make this point in the first time we recorded this, but I was thinking about that, but we had already transitioned. Like RFK is a true independent.
Mm-hmm.
Tulsi Gabbard, I mean, she's essentially an independent. Elon Musk is an independent. Vivek is kind of an independent.
Right.
So he's surrounded himself with those more, who I would align myself with is more of a centrist and more center right. And it's not a bad thing. And one of the points I made a while ago is we've entered a new phase of presidential history. And you have phases like the founding fathers presidents, which is the first 5. And then once you remove from Reagan to Obama, that is a presidential history window that the presidents were all pretty much picked by the party, and the party ran the presidency.
Right.
Not necessarily ran the country, but the presidency was run through that party. And I think we agree on this. Trump is not a party candidate. And I don't think he was the first time either. Mm-mm. And then when they tried to run Biden as a party candidate, it failed miserably. Mm-hmm. And I think, and again, we probably won't be alive to witness this, but we're entering a fully new window of presidential candidates. And that's a good thing, I believe. I think that the parties have too much power. I think that you're seeing some of that come out with the congressional bill that came out, that came out last week. And I think that this is not a bad thing.
Right.
And I think that you'll see, the party lines are still going to be there, but you may see some Republicans go towards the more center, and you might see some Democrats come over to the right and Republicans go over to the quote unquote left, and see that swing both ways, which is not a bad thing.
No. And when you saw that, you saw Liz Cheney, Dick Cheney, other quote unquote Republicans going to the left this election cycle. So you saw that, but that's an interesting point about Biden being the opposite of that. So I'm making this point that it's more about Trump and his personality and his ideology than it is about the Republican ideology that was key in this election. But you're right that they ran Biden as a party candidate, because I don't think that 50 years in government Joe Biden is that far left.
No.
The super woke, far left, that's not him. That's not who he is as a candidate, but that's who the party was. So that's who he became in his presidency, whereas Trump is a complete opposite of that.
Yeah.
We talked about how Trump did not participate in the Republican primary debates. He just said, I don't need to. And like we said, he's already on that stage himself. He doesn't need the party to push him and to vault him up onto the stage for a national election. He's already there, and he's bringing the party along with him, saying, this is the way this party is going to operate now that I am the leader of this party, now that I have the nomination. Come with me or don't. And
I think that there were a lot that came with him, and that there's been, as you said, Cheneys that didn't.
Right.
I agree with you. I agree wholeheartely with you.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're having these conversations, I think both of us are trying to, at least I am, I guess I won't speak for you, but I'm trying to come up with a alternate side to what you're saying, but I really can't. I think that that's a great point. I think that the parties, and that's a great historical moment too, to see that change and that shift happen. Now we just have to follow along and see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we've had a rough 8 years. And if you really want to go back even further, it's been longer than that. But these last 8 years have been tumultuous, to say the least.
Yes.
And so it's a direction swing in a different pathway.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not always a bad thing, as long as we recognize what is happening. And I think that it's okay. And I think that it's a good move. I think that you're exactly right in your thought. I think you're exactly right in your analysis of it. Not something that I had really thought about,
mm-hmm.
which I like.
And I do like the idea that there is some dissonance between the party as a whole and like the president as a leader, because Trump has said there may be some Republicans who don't agree with me and don't come along with these policies. That's okay. I can bring you along. I can also go to the other side and get Democrats to come alongside with me. And I mean, hey, anytime someone's taking that approach instead of saying, well, I've got to go kiss the ring of these people that have been in party control for decades in order to get anything done, that's not good. I don't like that. I like someone who's going to say, no, I was elected. I have a mandate. I'm going to go lead. Come along with me or don't.
Yeah.
There's nuance to that.
Yeah.
You want to bring people in and make your case. But I do like that, we, the people, have elected a president, and it's not these big money outsiders who are unelected that are going to be shaping the agenda. It's going to be the president who was elected by the people shaping the agenda.
And the people that have surrounded him show that. The people around him show that. Mm-hmm. And I think that, him picking J.D. Vance as he was a rookie congressman, and then pulling in Tulsi Gabbard, who was a former Democrat, showed more of a centrist move, which is a good thing. And I think that you're going to see, as the policies and things come along, you're going to see that. So that swings us into the next point. In the Economic Times, the title of this article was Elon Musk and Donald Trump Plan for Simplified Tax Code. What's that mean for your wallet? Now, I enjoy when you, Clint, talk numbers. I enjoy it because my brain doesn't work that way. As you put it in the run sheet, I don't want to nerd out too much on numbers, but I enjoy that. Mm-hmm. So one of the things in the policies that they're talking about is a flat tax. First off, is that possible? That's my first question. Is a federal flat tax as a CPA, is that possible?
I mean, yeah, you have to get it past the Congress. I mean, so speaking logistically, mechanically, I don't think there's the support out there for it. I think the talk of a flat tax is being used to spur along conversation for a simplified tax code. I don't think I would be, and I'm leaving room to be shocked because a lot of things have shocked me in this election cycle and what's happened. So I'm leaving room for that, but even leaving room to be shocked, I would be shocked if we come up to our next election in 2028 and the United States has moved away from an income tax to a flat tax.
Okay, explain to me why that would shock you. Like, because I'm being honest with you. To me, the tax code is so complicated. And because that's not my wheelhouse. I mean, we get a W-9 and we file our taxes and then we move on. That's just the type of, not W-9, W-2?
Yep.
W-2. And we just move on. And we take our deductions. We don't itemize. We just take the standard deduction and we move on. We pay our taxes. I moan and gripe about it. And then I was like, well, what are you going to do? So for a person like me that just has the standard deductions, that just has the W-2, would a flat tax help my pocketbook?
It depends on what stays. So the way it works right now, and this is the nerding out part, but I'll try to stay really high level, because podcast, mostly words. Yes, we have video, but, and side note, go find us on YouTube, TikTok, yes. Instagram. We have videos, we have shorts. Also, it's not just our audio, but in audio, numbers don't work a lot of times so great. So the way that the system works now is you have income, and there's a lot of things that get deducted from that. Like on your W-2, that if you look at, if you're a W-2 employee, if you look at box 1 is your gross wages for the year, if that's your number, that's not your actual salary, because medical insurance, it's paid, any retirement contributions, not any, but most of them, 401ks, are all get deducted from that amount right off the bat. Before you even report that on your tax return, those amounts get deducted. So you take your actual salary, what you got paid, and then on your W-2, those amounts are already out of there. That goes on the tax return. And then, like you say, you have your deductions. One of the things Trump did with the tax bill passed in 2017 that took effect for tax year 2018, this is the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, referred to as the TCJA. One of the things that did is it doubled the standard deduction. So what does that do? The standard deduction,
Pause.
yeah.
Pause. What is the standard deduction?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
So basically, you have the option as a taxpayer. Once you put your income down at the top of the tax return, you have an option of either just taking a flat number across the board just to make it easy, make it simple, or you can say, I want to itemize instead. The 4 big itemized deductions are out-of-pocket medical expenses. So above and beyond your health insurance, this is your copays, your prescription drugs, long-term care payments, things like that. The 2 really big ones that people get, mortgage interest and property taxes, and then charitable contributions. There's others in there, but those are the 4 big ones. So if you're
medical,
yeah, if you're out-of-pocket medical, your mortgage interest, property taxes, and charitable contributions are more than that standard deduction, it's more beneficial for you to itemize. If they're not, it's not. So by doubling the standard deduction in the TCJA, more people didn't need to itemize, which makes things simpler.
Gotcha.
Because I don't know what it is this next year. It's about $28,000, roughly. Property taxes are capped at $10,000. So you got $18,000 left for out-of-pocket medical, mortgage interest, charitable contributions. So if you just have a normal house, normal property taxes, and also for states that have state taxes, that's included in there as well. I'm speaking like a Texan, so I'm just talking about property taxes. But actually, if you have a state with a state tax, then your state and local taxes are included in there as well. Then most likely you're not going to itemize with a $28,000. That's if you're married, a $28,000 standard deduction. You're not going to get there with property taxes, mortgage interest, charitable contribution, unless you're giving a lot of money to charity. You have a really big house or have a really big house loan. So more people started using the standard deduction, which makes it simple because this is like your income minus your standard deduction. If you got a couple kids or something, you got a couple child tax credits, and then that gets you to what you pay in taxes. So for most people, if you have a married couple and they have W-2 income, they work for a company, their tax return, and I say this with the caveat that I'm a CPA, I think is pretty simple. W-2 income minus your standard deduction, a couple child tax credits on there. This is what you owe. There's only a handful. Yeah, there's only a handful of lines on the tax return that are getting numbers put on them. I mean, it's a 2-pager. It was originally, when they did the TCJA, they got it down to 1 page, but the very next year it went back to 2 pages of the 1040, the personal tax return. So, if you're just straight W-2 income, it's not that complicated, especially if you're not itemizing. There's just a few numbers on the page. So I think that the talk of flat tax is more in lines with what Trump did back then.
Gotcha.
Of saying, hey, well, there's some things we can do to simplify this. We can increase, like he did, increasing the standard deduction, just made it simpler. A flat tax is every single taxpayer in the U.S. has the same effective tax rate, which is, here's your income. If it like when Steve Forbes was running for president, he never got the nomination, but he ran as a candidate. His was 15%. So we can just throw that number out there. So say you have, you and your spouse, your total income comes out to $150,000. 15% flat tax means you're paying $22,500 in tax. That's how it works. And so, what that means is that high income earners are paying 15%. Low income earners are paying 15%. And when I say it depends, because, that's the answer that all accountants give anytime they're asked a question. Yeah. That's our standard reply is it depends. The reason it depends on if that's a good thing for you as a taxpayer or not is, are you still going to get those deductions? Because right now, you don't pay tax on your total income, on your actual total salary, because like I said, you have your health insurance premiums deducted, your 401k or your retirement contributions are deducted. You have the standard deduction. You have on top of that then a child tax credit. If you've got some kids, there are other credits available. If all of those things go away to create a true flat tax, then you're actually paying that flat tax amount on your total income. Every dollar you actually earn, which is not the case right now. So that's a concern. I don't think that's going to happen. I think they will continue to try to simplify it. But there's a couple misconceptions. The tax brackets are always something that confuse people. And it's because our tax system, again, we're going to talk some numbers and try not to get too boring here, but our tax system is what we call a progressive tax system. So they're in this article, they even say that. I highlighted it, so I'm just going to read it just so I can say it correctly. But a tax expert, I'm not going to name the person, but a consultant that they interviewed as part of this article that you referenced, says that one of the downfalls or potential downfalls to a flat tax is it can incentivize people to work more if they don't feel like they'll be penalized by going up a tax bracket. And really the idea and the premise of going up a tax bracket doesn't really exist. And here's why. Because let's say like the tax brackets, the reason called brackets is because there's income amounts inside the bracket. So the very first tax bracket is $0. Or I'm going to talk about married people. Okay. It's different if you're single, different if you are single, but have kids. We're going to talk about everybody who's just married filing a joint return. From $0 to $23,000 is your very first bracket. You pay 10% tax on that money.
Correct.
After $23,000 and up to almost $100,000 of income, you pay 12%. But if you say you went from making, $96,000, which is the edge of that 12% bracket, up to $100,000 of income, which is now bumps you to the 22% bracket, so a 10% increase. That doesn't mean every dollar you have, your whole tax liability is at 22%.
Only that 10%.
Right.
Only
that first 24,000 is still at 10%. That whole 24,000 to 97 is still 12%. Just the amount over that 97,000 is now in that 22%. So it is progressive. It moves up in that way. So really we call
pause.
Yeah.
You want to know how I thought it worked?
Yeah.
So you make 23,000. When you bump up into that second window, that second bracket, you are no longer, everything is taxed at that 23. Then when you make it to the third, you're then taxed at a higher rate. All of your income is taxed at the higher rate. And then you make it to the fourth, which I got to be honest with you.
Which would stink.
That was concerning because I didn't understand that. Like we talked a little bit about TIA and 8.1. That moves us into that next threshold.
And that is a concern. And
the fourth one, It
Right.
moves us into the fourth one as a married couple.
Yeah. If that was, if that actually was how it worked, then what this article is saying, like the disincentivizing to continue to work, would actually work. But that's not how it works.
Okay.
What it means is you're only paying from that next level up that additional tax. And I hate hearing this because there's this misconception. Like, so say your effective tax goes to 22% if you make over this amount. But say that raise that you get is, we'll just say it's $40,000. Okay. So you're telling me you're not going to take a $40,000 raise because you're going to pay an additional $8,000 in tax.
No, I'm not doing that.
And it's like the same people.
Take the raise.
Yeah, it's the same people that say I don't want to pay off my house because I don't want to lose the deduction. Yeah. Okay. So say your effective tax rate overall is 20%. Like, that doesn't make sense that you're going to continue. So it's one of these things where that's just a misnomer, kind of a fear tactic a little bit. But you're going to a flat tax just makes it across the board the same amount, which corporations have. So it's one of the things this article also talked about is that, this would affect tax for individuals and companies. No, it wouldn't. Corporations pay 21% no matter what size the company is. If you are a C Corp, if you have INC or incorporated after your business name, your tax rate is 21%. It doesn't matter if you are a small mom and pop shop on Main Street or if you are General Motors. Like, it is 21%. So they already have pretty much a flat tax. It's on the personal side. And I could see some benefit of streamlining that. But I think the progressive tax brackets, as confusing as they are, now here's the deal, like whether you're using an online service or whether you're using a CPA, everybody's got software and the software is calculating it.
Gotcha.
I'm not going to get down to the weeds of this. There's actually two different ways you can calculate it, and the software will pick the most advantageous one. And usually it'll show you like, hey, we picked this version and this is the most advantageous. So it's already doing that for you. So it is complicated, but think about it. Like, when you have someone who's just starting out, like right now, say it was 15%. Well, if you have someone who's just getting started and they're making $30,000, $40,000 a year, they're going to pay more in taxes. Plus, all of their dollars are going to be taxed.
Okay, and then that's where the idea of this, if they were to go to something like this, it would hurt the middle income, middle class, low income folks.
Yes.
More than it would the upper
Not
income.
to mention, say you're just starting out, and I'm just going to throw numbers out here. Both, mom and dad are working. You're making $40,000 each. You got $80,000 worth of income coming into your household. Your standard deduction is 28. I'm going to round numbers, so we're going to knock you down to 50 of taxable income. Okay, that puts you're in that 12% bracket. But half of your money is only taxed at 10%. Okay, and then the other half of your money is taxed at 12%. I'm going to round all that and just say you paid 10% in taxes because we're just doing round numbers. So $50,000 taxable income, $5,000 worth of tax, 10%. Okay. So you got two kids, your child tax credit's $2,000 each. That knocks off $4,000, you owe $1,000.
And then there's the standard deductions.
No, we've already taken that out.
Okay.
So if you don't follow all those numbers, that's fine. It's fine. What it comes out to is a couple people making $80,000 in their household with two kids are going to pay about $1,000, maybe to $1,500 worth of tax if they don't have anything else going for them credit wise. Okay, that's just saying it. But if it's a 15% flat tax on $80,000, that's $12,000 in tax.
It's more.
With there are no standard deduction, no child tax credits. So that's a real life example of just a couple people, husband and wife with two kids making $40,000 each. Their tax bill increases by $10,000 if it's a 15% flat tax. So there has to be, like, if this happens, there would have to be some kind of deduction to help with that, but then if you have the person who is in that third or fourth bracket,
they're like, yeah, let's go.
Your effective tax rate is probably more than 15%.
Yeah.
And I've used the word effective tax bracket, effective tax rate. So I'm just going to give that definition real quick, and then we'll try to crystallize this a little bit. your bracket rate, this 10%, 12%, 22%, 24% we've been talking about, that of each bracket is the marginal tax rate. The effective tax rate is the number that matters. That's what you actually pay. Take your income, take what you paid in tax, divide that, and that gives you your actual effective tax rate. I paid this percentage overall big picture tax on my income. So a person who has $80,000 worth of income, but because of the standard deduction and the child tax credit is paying $1,500 in tax, has a really low effective tax rate. A flat tax makes everybody's effective tax rate 15%.
Okay, so you've convinced me. I was always a flat tax guy.
I don't like it, so I should add the observation too. I'm going to speak in a bent kind of against it because I don't think it's a good idea. I do think you can simplify it, but the point I was trying to make earlier is I know the brackets are confusing and it's hard to like think about the progressive tax system and how that works. And I got this raise at work, or I have this additional income. How's it actually going to affect me? It's not an easy calculation. And they run on that in the campaign. They'll say like, hey, if you get a $20,000 raise, you should know exactly how much tax that's going to cost you. Well, no, because not if it hurts you. Like, are you saying I would rather not have to do some math and just pay more in tax? Like, nobody's going to say that.
Yeah.
Like, it's a little complicated, but that's what we have software for. And I think it really does benefit people as they're coming up to have the progressive tax rates. So there was a time before, whenever it was like 0 to 9,000 or something, we had brackets years ago where it was 0. There was a 0% tax bracket out there.
Really?
Now it's 10%. Everybody, like, you make $1, you pay 10%. But anyway, that's the long and short. I don't really think the flat tax is good, but I do support them saying, hey, we can simplify this. But it's like, I don't want to make people pay more in tax just to make the tax code easier to understand. But I do think it is a campaign topic that is very popular to say, you should be able to file your tax return on a postcard. Not if I'm going to pay more. Like, let's talk this out and think about it. Do I care that my 1040 is 2 pages long and I get to pay less in tax? Like,
yeah, it just has always seemed so complicated to me. The person who, like, my wife takes care of that. She fills out I don't even know what software TurboTax or whatever that she uses. And she's like, well, either we get, a refund or we don't. And I'm like, oh, well, okay, great.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
it's a little black boxy. It's like the numbers go in the front and they spit out the end, and you don't really understand what all happens in the middle, and so it is a little black boxy, and people can get a little sidestruck or whatever at the end if they were expecting a refund and they turn out to owe, that can and you don't understand, and you don't understand why.
Why? Yeah. And I want to close this conversation with whenever I hear people say that high schoolers need to learn how to do this. Yes, I agree with you. But this is taught in high school. And it is so complicated to try to teach a 18-year-old about the tax code. It's so complicated because it's difficult for me as a 40-year-old to even wrap my brain around exactly what a standard deduction is, if a flat tax. This is all very, very complicated. So when I hear stuff like, well, we need to teach financial literacy to high school kids, well, heck, I could sit here and have a conversation with you and I'd still be a little bit confused. And because it's a complicated conversation, and it's a conversation that is ever changing.
Yeah. The last thing I'll say about that is don't get your tax advice from TikTok.
No.
It's yeah.
Okay, so let's talk. I know this is not on the run sheet, but do you think they're actually going to ban TikTok?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Okay,
because I think Trump has used it. So
the same conversation that we had with the drones. Do we care?
No, I don't.
I like TikTok, but there's other things that are out there that are just the same. You can get on Facebook Reels, Instagram Reels, now YouTube Shorts, and it's the same. It's not any different. I don't care. I'll be like, oh man, that sucks. But I think here's what I do think. If this does actually get banned, I think the younger generation, so I'm talking about from our older daughter's age, so say 13 to 25, maybe even 13 to 30, that 15 to 30, that 15-year window. They will not forget that.
Yeah.
They will not forget it. And that's something that congressional people need to remember, because especially as we head into midterms, TikTok is extremely important to young people. And I mean, and to us, like, we post on TikTok, and we get some feedback. We've gotten some followers. We've gotten some things like that. So when we start to talk about banning things like a TikTok, we need to understand the ramifications that it has on the younger population of our country.
And what they care about.
And they care about that, and that matters to them. So we've been putting this conversation off a couple of times, and this is a good week to talk about it. But we had a bit of a, in the sporting world, a bit of a, how do we say it, controversy with transgender people playing in women's sports. Now, I coach women's sports. I coach girls high school volleyball, girls high school track. I've coached girls basketball. I have 2 daughters. This makes me a little bit qualified to speak on this. We've put this off for a couple of weeks, and so this is kind of the perfect time in a dead political landscape right now. This is a horrible idea. Okay, we saw the volleyball teams in California. I believe it was in the Big 10. No, the Big 12. No, the Pac-12. Where there were volleyball programs that were not participating against a transgender in volleyball. Now, let me explain something about volleyball that is unlike any other sport, to where you do have men and women who compete at this sport. Okay?
Right.
I have been at tournaments where there have been boys teams and they play against girls teams. Now, in high school volleyball, the net for a boys team is a foot taller. Okay, I don't remember the exact height, but a foot taller than the girls' net. So a boy who is about 6 foot tall, when they stand at the net, if they have a 7.5 to 8 foot reach, they can reach above the net, and their hands will go above the net. So, for example, when we had a really good team a couple of years ago, and we had a boy that was in off-season basketball. He was 6'4". So we would bring him in on weeks where we had a good competitive block coming in, and he would just stand there and just jump and block. That's all he did. Now, the technique was horrible, but he would jump up, and his chin would be above the net. He's an above average athlete. He wasn't a superstar D1 athlete. He was just an above average athlete. And he would dominate against some very good volleyball players that were girls. Now, the other thing that I have an issue with is the fact that these girls at the start of the season did not know that they were competing against a transgender. And this poses a problem. And this is the question that I have, and you can speak on this or not, and this can just be a Kyle conversation with you, and you just listen. But if my daughter is competing against a person who was born biologically a male, I want to know.
Yeah.
If my team is competing against a biological male that was born that way, I feel like I need to know that. One, so I can prepare them. The average girl who plays Division II and Division I volleyball needs to hit the ball about 75 miles an hour. Okay, when it comes off their hand in an attack, it needs to go about 75. That's pretty fast, and that's difficult to dig. Okay. A male who plays Division II volleyball hits it somewhere between 90 and 100. Now, there are girls who have received severe injuries, like concussions, where they were never the same, because a girl can't jump as high as a boy can. And that is a huge issue. It's a huge issue. And this has been politicized. This has been pushed out there as something that's considered to be wrong to say, or but if you compete at what the national volleyball level, okay, in the club world, so you're talking about high school volleyball at a high competitive level. If you are a boys team, you have to compete 2 to 3 age groups up. So, for example, my daughter played 14U volleyball.
Mm-hmm.
The boys' team was 9U.
Yeah.
And they beat the brakes off of them.
Mm-hmm.
Like the boys beat the brakes off the girls. And these girls are 15, and the boys are like 10
Mm-hmm.
or 11. And it wasn't even fair.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't even fair, these 10-year-old boys who were very good. Now, when they got to the more competitive teams and they move up into the rankings of competing against the higher level girls who are playing Division I volleyball, they can't beat them, okay? But when you're playing an average 15-year-old girls team against an elite 10-year-old boys team, they will win 9 times out of 10. And this is something that I hope, and it feels like, is kind of swinging the other way. The pendulum is swinging the other way. But these girls have a right to know.
Yeah.
And if they choose not to compete, then that is their choice, and we should honor that.
Yeah, and it was San Jose State that many teams in the Mountain West Conference forfeited their games against.
Mountain West.
Because they had a transgender biological male playing in women's volleyball. And I think, I can speak abstractly about it. You have the detail and the knowledge of coaching that particular sport. But we have, like, just as a society, whatever your politics are, whatever that, we have to be able to say unapologetically that when it comes to some things, boys are better, and when it comes to some things, girls are better, and that's okay. Like, to say that they're different.
Why is that controversial?
Because you don't want to say that anyone is better at anything, or anyone, you don't want to, I believe that when you say boys are better at sports than girls, it makes people think that girls are something less.
But do you feel that way?
No, not at all.
I don't either.
But here's the thing, like, you could take a top-notch high school girls volleyball team, and like me and my neighbor buddies, they would beat the brakes off of us. Like 100%.
Yeah.
Are there girls that are better at sports than men? Some men, yes. But if you take the same age group, you take a top-notch male volleyball team and a top-notch female volleyball team of the same age group, the guys are going to be better across the board. Could there possibly be a just absolute rock star on that girls team that was better than some of the boys on the other side of the court? Sure. I'm allowing for that. I don't know. I'm just allowing for that. But we've got to get away from this. It's okay, or it's not okay to say that they're different. I ran across this. I was listening to a lecture a few years ago, and it talked about even just some of the biological differences between boys and girls. For example, in our eyes, like boys have, this is getting back to biology, which I didn't study out past high school. My degree did not require it. So, but if you remember back in biology, they talked about rods and cones in your eyes. Rods help you see at night. They help you see big picture things. Cones help you see detail. Boys have more rods. Girls have more cones. And think about the way this makes sense.
Yeah,
if we are driving, I will see braking way up ahead, or I will see a car swerving way up ahead. My wife will not. I'm noticing things when we're walking in the mall of someone who may be acting suspicious, or someone that I have an eye on. My wife's not picking up on any of that. My sister-in-law just had a new baby. I've seen the baby. My wife has seen the baby. Which one of us do you think can describe what the baby looks like better?
Definitely her.
Yeah, I can't tell you what color eyes the baby has. Okay, because we don't notice that kind of detail, because we're not even just set up for it as men, but we are set up for big picture things. And like, that's just a difference. It doesn't mean that my wife can't notice those things. It's just the way her brain, her eyes are set up. That's just one simple example of just how the biology is different. And it's like, it's okay. Both of those things are needed, and both of those things are good. And it doesn't mean that women can't play sports or shouldn't play sports. It has nothing to do with any of that. But if you put a biological male in playing in a females with females in a sport, that's an unfair disadvantage no matter how you slice it. You see it across the board. It's like, I forget the names, but the swimmer.
Yeah.
Like, it looked like everyone else is moving in slow motion. Like it's ridiculous, the difference. And then we're trying to say, yeah, that's fair. No, it's not. And someone who, the swimmer, again, can't think of their name, whatever, was not doing well on the college circuit at all when they were competing against other men. But as soon as they began competing against women, started winning everything. Like, what does that tell you?
Yeah. And I think that's the pendulum swing that I hope we're going away from.
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay to have separate things.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that frustrates me. It frustrates me to all end, because then you're taking away the hard work that my daughters put in just because some person feels like they need to compete against a girl, or vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
Like in combat sports, right? If you watch guys fight UFC and then you watch the girls, they're both very impressive.
Yes.
If you put me against one of those UFC girls,
Exactly.
they're going to rip my arm off.
Exactly right.
But if you were to fight a top-notch UFC girl against a top-notch UFC man, he might kill her.
Yes.
And that's where
that happened in the Olympics with boxing.
I saw that where she backed out.
I will watch.
She took 2 punches.
Yes.
And it's like,
That was it.
and that's the other thing too. Like,
This is someone who's an Olympian
yeah,
at the top of their sport.
yes,
And they take 2 punches and they're like, I can't continue. Like, how are you going to sit back and
say
objectively
that's okay.
say that's fair and that's
And then
okay?
they tried to come out and say that person had some kind of genetic disorder, but then like now we're removed from the situation. Turns out actually they were biologically a male at one point.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the thing too. Like we go to this, the left and the right is guilty of this, of listening to the loudest group.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have the group over on the right that screams about certain things, and then like, oh, we gotta comfort that. No, that's outlandish.
Yeah, it is.
And then we have the people on the left who do the exact same things, and these two groups are exactly the same.
Uh-huh.
And we have to stop that. We have to come back to the middle. It's just like what we've talked about with politics. It's not any different. And I hope, now this flipping it back to what we've been talking about with Trump being a different president. Like, it has to be some common sense. Like, if you were born a male, you compete with born genetic males. If you have some sort of an issue, I'm sorry, then you fall where you fall. Mm-hmm. Right? And the same goes for women, right? I've known lots of girls who have tried to play football, but when they get up to the higher levels of even high school football, it's not the same.
Yes.
It's not the same. And I've seen girls try it, and they 9 times out of 10, maybe 99.99999 out of 100 quit because it's too hard.
Listen, in the 8th grade, I got trucked. One of the hardest I've ever been hit in football by a girl. Like, does it exist? Absolutely. But like you say, when you get to the higher levels and you get the boys maturing later, like, you're not going to have that. Can a girl play high school football? Absolutely. Could she be competitive? Absolutely. Is she going to be at the top in that male-dominated sport? Is she going to go to college on scholarship? Is they going to go to the NFL? No. That's not going to happen. They're not going to meet those, and that's okay. Like, we've got to be okay with saying that's fine. It doesn't mean that girl is any less, at all. But if you think about it, even with age groups, like, what if someone wanted to identify as 5 years younger and play in a lower football team,
right?
But you wouldn't allow that.
No.
Not one chance. Like, I remember my son playing football. Like, we've got to show the birth certificates.
Correct.
You know, they are checking those things because it matters that much. There is a disadvantage. It's the exact same, you know, with this. And we've just got to be okay with saying people are different. Girls are different than boys. Boys are different than girls. And we're okay with that. And there's nothing wrong with that. And no one is any less than the other person because someone might be better to sport with them just because they're a biological male.
And we have to be okay with it. Yeah. And I think that, as I said just a second ago, it appears that we're moving away from that. Mm-hmm. Just kind of the sense that I get of what I see and what I read and some of the pushback that has come with this particular person in volleyball. And I feel like you'll see more of that. And then the universities are going to say, hey, we can't allow this. It's just not, it's not what's right. It's not what's fair.
And we haven't even started talking about the locker room.
I don't know if we really want to.
No, I mean,
to me, that's such a common sense thing too, right? I don't even really want to go there because to me, it's a dumb conversation. There should not be biological males in there.
No.
Period. End of statement. There's a reason they do physicals different for men than what they do for women.
Right.
And there's a reason for that. Your anatomy is different. So I hope we don't ever have to get to the point to where they're having to blood test people to see if they're a biological male or female. But I mean, it seems to me that it's very, very simple, and we overcomplicate this stuff way too much.
And I hear what you're saying about the trend moving back in the right direction. It seems like, that was something that Trump ran on. That was a key issue in the election of guys shouldn't be playing women's sports. That's all there is to it. And I feel like with Trump's victory, it's like it's made it okay for the people in the mainstream to come out and say, yeah, common sense wise, that's right.
Yeah.
And it's okay for me to come out and say that. And so I think that's why you see the kind of the trend is because for a long time, most of the populace was pretty silent on it and didn't really want to have an opinion because you don't want to come out and say like, no, the guy's better. Like just biologically, that's the way it is. Like there was some pushback on just coming out and just saying what was obvious and just saying the obvious truth in it.
And I think it's amazing to me that we were at a point where people couldn't just say, hey, this is not okay. This is not okay. Like you even saw companies like having 4 different bathrooms. And okay, if you want to make everybody feel okay and you want to have just unisex bathrooms, that's fine. Whatever. I don't have a problem with that. You can lock the door and you can go in and do your business and get out. But it becomes an issue for me whenever young ladies are getting hurt and having traumatic brain injuries because of balls coming at them 115 miles an hour and they cannot physically move fast enough to deflect the ball.
Right.
And it hasn't happened in Texas. At the UIL level, it has not been allowed. There's been some that have tried, but it hasn't gained any traction. And I'm thankful for that. That was never something so far that I've had to deal with as a coach. So, wrapping up. It's a little bit shorter this week.
Yeah, our I don't know, we did pretty good, but I think one of the things we talked about before we lost all of our content, I do want to mention, and we talked about a little bit, that Jimmy Carter passed away just hours before, or at least went out on the news hours before we recorded, and just kind of what that means. We said some things about Jimmy Carter and policies and, how he won coming out of the Nixon era, Ford pardoning Nixon, but then lost and the Reagan Revolution began. He kind of ran into a buzzsaw of Reagan. But it is notable, what he did outside of his presidency.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of good things to say about what he did inside of his presidency. Not that it's like there's nothing good there. It's just there's nothing really notable to me about him as a president. He, was really heavy into environmental legislation. But that kind of makes sense a little bit, the way the society was going in the late 70s and, just factories and car exhaust and like industrialization and things, I see that. But, Habitat for Humanity and just his work there, him just being a good guy, a good person, a Christian, Sunday school teacher. When I was in high school, I did debate, and one of our debate topics one year, we would keep the same topic for the entire year, and you'd build cases and go far with just this one topic. And the topic was worded in such a way that said, a politician's personal life does not affect their performance. And that was straight from Clinton. It was coming out of the Clinton era of what had happened during his presidency. And the topic was talking about, was Clinton still a good president, even though he was morally flawed? And when I would argue, because I'd argue both sides, when I would argue that Clinton was still a good president, even though he was morally flawed, I would use Jimmy Carter a lot.
Yeah.
Morally great president, not a great president, policy wise. So, you know, long life, 100 years old.
Voted in the election.
Apparently he did. I saw the video of him on a gurney, basically.
On that side too. Like, I think that Carter had a lot of good things outside of his presidency that he did, especially after he left office. He didn't. I don't particularly remember him being in the spotlight a whole lot after he got out of the presidency. You'd see him pop up every once in a while, but
he campaigned for Obama.
But it wasn't like he didn't. I kind of like that he kind of went into the background, and that's how it should be.
Yeah.
It's a lot like W. Bush has done.
Exactly.
He's kind of fallen into the background of history and stayed out of politics for the most part. Now, Obama has not done that. Obama has not done that, and it'll be interesting to see as we go into this election, finishing up, you know, Biden's presidency, if Obama kind of takes a step forward. I know he can't run for president, but he could take a bigger step in having more influence in the Democratic Party.
To me, it makes sense as a president, especially when you're a 2-term president. You won both, kind of like take your ride off into the sunset and get your library built and you know, speak up on the causes you want to speak up on, like Carter did for Habitat for Humanity. But you know, you have Obama coming out hard for VP Harris, and then she loses. I mean, that's just kind of a bad look to the end of your legacy. Whereas if you'd kind of stayed back, you know, and kind of said, hey, I had my time, you know, and maybe whenever they come to your hometown, or if she goes to Chicago to campaign, then you can get up and speak for her. But, you know, the way he jumped back into the limelight with this last election, I think is a bad look. And I appreciate Carter saying, I was president, I lost, and now I'm going to go do things that matter to me. I'm going to teach my Sunday school class. I'm going to go do Habitat for Humanity, do other things through the Carter Foundation. He eradicated some disease in Africa. I forget the name of it, but it was something that he continued to fight for after his presidency. So that's great. I mean, I think he's a great life. I can't say a lot of good things about policy-wise for those 4 years he was president, but definitely a good person. And now Clinton is our oldest.
That's crazy to think about.
You know, all we have left is Clinton, Bush, Obama, Biden, Trump.
It's crazy to think about. So one thing before we leave, what is your most rewatchable TV series?
I have some that I want to go back and watch right now.
I'll go first.
Yeah.
I have 2. Well, technically 3. I really enjoy watching Dexter.
Okay. My wife likes that one a lot.
The new series just came out, Original Sin, where it's like a prequel. So I am in the process of watching that and rewatching the old stuff. And I really enjoy watching Game of Thrones.
Yes.
Those 2 series are the intense shows that I like to watch. And then I always like to watch Friends and Big Bang, but those are the 2 series that I will continually rewatch.
The one that I've watched the most, there's 2 that I've watched the most from beginning to end. And that is, I have watched Game of Thrones completely through 3 times. I've also watched The West Wing completely through 3 times. I've watched House of Cards completely through twice. I do lean more towards the political stuff, but I will say a couple that I want to go back to and rewatch are Sons of Anarchy and Breaking Bad. I feel like those are great series. I finished Billions this past year. That was really good.
Is that the one with the family?
Yes.
Okay, I've like season 2 or 3.
Or Succession might be what you're thinking of.
Oh, okay, yeah. I'm thinking of that.
Both of those I finished this year. They ended, and I would rewatch those. Those are very good.
Okay.
I'll rewatch either one of those. A series that I like that went on for like 15 years just ended. They had the series finale, and that's Blue Bloods with Tom Selleck. That is just an amazing. If you haven't watched it, I highly recommend Blue Bloods. It is 15 seasons, so you've got. It's not like these other ones. You know, went 4, 5, 6, 7 seasons. You're kind of in them and done, and 10 episodes or so a season. Blue Bloods is like 24 episodes.
Holy cow!
I see 20 or 24.
I didn't watch that one.
And 15 years, and they ended it well. it was just a couple weeks ago. It was on Friday nights, and it was just maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. And I was watching it the next day on like Saturday, doing some work in my office, and had it on the iPad. And Brittany came in to leave, my wife, to go somewhere, and I was a little misty eyed, had some allergies, and she was like, "What's wrong?" And I was like, "They did a good job. It is difficult these days, especially lately, to find a series they end well."
Yeah.
And Blue Bloods, they did it well. I liked the way they ended it. Had me a little misty-eyed in the finale. And it wasn't from a main. There was someone who dies in the last episode, but it's not a super main character that's been there the whole time, and so it wasn't anything like that. It was just they really ended it well. And one of the things they do in Blue Bloods that I want to do with our family, but we haven't started it yet, is every Sunday they have dinner together. The whole family gets around the table. They're an Irish Catholic family. They all get around the dinner table. They have a big dinner, glass of wine, and they all have dinner together as an extended family. And that's something that I hope, like later on, maybe with my kids, if they're still close, that's something we can mimic and do. But that is a good show that ended well.
Are you watching any current ones?
I'm watching Landman.
Same.
That's a good one.
It's a great show.
I like it.
A great show. Did you watch last night's episode?
Yes. Well, I just started like I'm 10 minutes in.
Okay.
I watched about 10 minutes of it. But Taylor Sheridan, man, he's got some good stuff. I did like Yellowstone. I think they ended it okay. They did kind of had to squash it real quick because Kevin Costner left the show, and so. But it was a pretty good.
Did you watch the prequels to that? I didn't watch Yellowstone, but I did watch the prequels.
Yeah, I watched the
1923 and 1886.
1883. Yeah, those both were good prequels. But Lioness is another one of his that's very good that we're watching. We just finished that current season. And then Landman has been good, so he's got some good stuff. I like that he films a lot also in Texas. That makes me happy too on the inside. So
Happy New Year, man.
Happy New Year.
It'll
Catch y'all in
2025 when we do this again.
2025.
See you.